Well, hi, folks, and welcome to another Peak Careers interview. I'm Jim Peacock, and today I'm really excited to explore this whole idea. Why do we need to rethink work in this day and age, and why is it so different, and why is it sometimes so difficult? And David Blustein is a professor at Boston College, and I've been a fan of yours, David, for a long time, man. I've seen you speak at NCDA and a number of times. And so I'm really anxious to sort of hear your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so David is author of Psychology of Working, New Perspective for Career Development, Counseling and Public Policy, and also recently published Importance of Work in an Age of Uncertainty, the Eroding Experience of Work in America. But what I really love about your work is the fact that you're really focused on being inclusive and social justice perspective. And I just think the work that you've done has just been eye-opening in that field, and really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed our interactions over the past few years, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Thank you. Thank you for supporting my work as well over the years.
Absolutely. So this pandemic has amplified so many things in our society, and I think work is just one of those things. Yeah. You sent me a sort of a brief about you're going to be speaking at Maine Career Development Association this year, which is you and I have been talking about doing that for a while, so I'm really pumped up about that. But I read this little piece that you gave to me. I'd like you to talk a little bit, but what do you mean by people are wounded and grieving, and how does that affect career development? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That's an issue that really has fascinated me over the last few years, is how are we responding psychologically to the pandemic? And I guess my argument is that we're going through a period of intense loss and mourning. And it's not unlike what countries that have lost a lot of people due to warfare have gone through. And I think particularly about Britain after World War I, where actually there was so much loss and mourning. It actually did affect the development of psychological theories to describe that period of mourning. But in the US, we're almost at 1 million people who've died of COVID. Now, if we would have said that 2 years ago, that we're going to lose 1 million people, I think people would have been shocked and really upset. Now, somehow this has happened over 2 years. And I think partly there's this sense of we've kind of gotten a little bit perhaps used to these losses. And I know now we're in a period of hope regarding the pandemic. But I think what we're going through actually is a period where our sense of security and stability has been seriously compromised. And in some of my recent research and writing, I've been talking about this as an age of precarity. And this concept of precarity is often used to describe precarious work, which a lot of us know about. I mean, short-term, unstable work. But even outside of the fields of counseling, career development, vocational psychology, career education, there has been a lot of interest in this concept of precarity writ large. It's actually been discussed in philosophy, economics, anthropology, and over this last year or so, I've delved into it for some research studies. And to me, this work is really profoundly important. So one way to describe precarity is the differential distribution of a common human vulnerability. And another aspect of precarity is that it's very much connected to structural barriers. So when there's periods like this of vulnerability and loss and instability, people who've already been on the margins suffer more from it. It's a much more profoundly painful experience. We see this in the pandemic, in the fact that we've lost more people of color, we've lost more older people, we've lost more people with disabling conditions. So in many ways, this experience of precarity, I think, has become much more elevated in our psyches. And, one could argue that we've always had precarity, I mean, throughout the history of humanity. And in some ways, what you could also suggest is our illusions of safety have been debunked. that we now realize that life is kind of unstable. So
but you know
that's,
what,
yeah.
if I might just jump in, and that is the thing about the pandemic is it's been this like a drip, you know, it's like, and it's been slow, and it's like, for me, my stress has always sort of been just a little below the surface, you know, and I feel like, you know, that there's some stuff that it's like, why do I feel this way, right? I mean, why am I feeling this way? And a lot of it is because it's just been this slow process. 1 million people, oh my God, but it's not been that for us. It's been, you know, 1,000 here, you know, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, but still, I mean, it's been this slower thing, and it's really hard to get my arms around it sometimes.
Yeah, it is, Jim, and I agree with you. It has, and I think, you know, I think many people know people who've passed away who have suffered enormously from the pandemic, whether it be the virus or, you know, work disruptions or relationship disruptions. But it has been a kind of slow drip, unless, of course, you're on the front lines. And, you know, a lot of us in our fields have been able to work remotely, not everyone, but I think working remotely has been a great advantage for people. But I guess it's the sense, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers, I'm sure a number of people have had COVID, but it's the experience, I guess, what you feel like when you get up one morning with a sore throat. And it's no longer just a sore throat. Is this COVID? Is this not? Yeah. So I think that kind of gives us a sense of what this experience has been like. And then we add to it the war in Ukraine, which is, you know, I mean, you could say it's not really affecting us, maybe not physically, but it is affecting us in almost every possible way. And I would argue even physically, because the level of anxiety, precarity is so intense. The fact that we're viewing this on TV, that many of us know people in that region of the world, that we know people in Ukraine. It's very, very painful. And I think that's another factor that's causing people to feel wounded and grieving.
But you know, your point, and this is, to me, you know, kind of your wheelhouse, is the fact that the people who are in the margins, you know, they're not, most of them are not able to work from home, right? I mean, exactly. So a lot of us, you know, my kids, hey, work from home, we can do this. You know, I work from home already, but you know, people are working from home, but they tend to be the upper middle class, you know, more professional. But who's suffering? Those are not people who are, you know, the heads of your local Rotary clubs, and your president of, you know, they're not getting the headlines, you know. Right. And so I think a lot of this suffering, and as I think about this from a career coach's perspective, a lot of this suffering has been people who can't even afford to hire me as a career coach. I mean, where are these people? You know.
Exactly. I mean, the reality is the low-wage workers, the essential workers, have suffered enormously. People have gotten sick at work. People have gotten COVID and have died through the contamination of being in the workplace. That has been a very profound experience. And you're right, in some ways, this is my wheelhouse, because in many ways, the experience of this pandemic has been bifurcated. There are some people who've been able to work at home. I feel very lucky to have been able to do so. And I've been on sabbatical this year, so I haven't had to go in to teach. But I will go in next year. But I think that those of us who can work at home, it's been somewhat of a different experience, although working from home has its downsides as well.
Yeah. But you know, you see all these signs, help wanted, but those are a lot of those entry-level positions that were filled by the group that we're talking about, this marginalized group, the people who are going paycheck to paycheck, and oh, nobody wants to work. You know, people want to work. People are working, you know, and as I mentioned to you, I read this article today, New York Times, about the fact that the reality is the labor force participation rate is almost back to 2019 numbers. And this guy I got made myself a note, because he actually looked at, you know, the 25 to 54-year-old, because that's your peak labor force age. And 2019, it was 83%, and right now it's 82.5.
Wow.
So where is everybody? Well, it must be the older people, all the folks who retired. And guess what? 2019, it was 65.7% for the age group 55 to 64, and it's 65.5. It's within two tenths of a percentage point. It's not that. It's a lot of things. I think a lot of these people that you were talking about, they're not there. They don't. It's those entry level jobs that we physically drive by and see the help wanted signs, but those people are not working. And then this article was really about the fact that we've cut back immigration so much, and those people oftentimes, right, historically, who did those frontline jobs? It was the new Mainers, the new Americans, right? And they came in and they were willing to do anything to sort of get their foot in the door. So it's been this marginalized group of people is something I'm really more aware of now than ever. So
yeah, and that has been my wheelhouse. That has been the focus of my work for the last 2 decades, trying to give voice to marginalized workers and to those who are left out of, kind of the world of career development that many of us trained in and really have such a passion for, which is why I developed psychology of working theory, which has been an objective of mine for the last, the last 20 years, to develop a theory and a framework that would speak to everybody who works and who wants to work. So I think, in some ways you've asked another question you want me to consider was how would my work speak to the needs of career practitioners, career service providers?
Yeah.
So yeah, I could speak briefly about that if you like.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very relevant to this era. So the psychology of working framework and theory is really structured around this idea of it functioning as the theory of change. That the research that we've done on psychology of working and the practice innovations and the public policy recommendations have really been in the service of developing knowledge that would help to foster change, broad systemic change, as well as change for individuals. So some of the main premises of psychology of working theory are that working ideally can fulfill some core human needs. And I kind of conceptualize them in 3 clusters. The first one is the need for survival and power. The next one is the need for relatedness and social contribution. And the third is the need for self-determination. So these are the 3 needs. And the reason why I kind of put them together is I felt like the need for survival was overlooked by career practitioners. And particularly in the era that, a lot of us more mature practitioners who kind of got trained in the latter part of the 20th century when the economy was ostensibly growing, although there were many pockets where it was really struggling. But the traditional career development narrative, as my friend Mark Savickas calls it, was really framed around people having self-determination, developing a life of purpose and meaning, which I still totally feel committed to, and I would love to see everybody have that opportunity. So PWT, which is how we refer to this body of work, really tries to give voice to the broad array of needs that working can fulfill. And we've also developed some new models of career counseling that I think would be very useful for people.
Yeah, I do. When I teach the facilitating career development class, and people are, finding purpose, this is all about, that they like integrative life planning and all these, and I go, don't forget, there's sometimes people just need a job. Right. Just they're really surviving. They're not here to find a job that they're like gonna love this job forever. They just need a job, and we as career coaches, we need to remember that, right? I mean, that's that's what I'm hearing you say in that. That's the first leg there.
Yes, it's the first leg, and it doesn't mean that we would work with people who need a job that we forget about the more the needs for purpose and meaning and a life where a person feels fulfilled by their work. And often in the work I've done as a practitioner, I've tried to kind of scaffold my interventions. If somebody really needed to focus on the more imminent needs, I would try to direct my attention there. But I would often help them think about, for example, okay, if you need a job right now, can we think of something that would allow you to explore something that you're interested in, that would allow you to kind of develop new skills that might help you to increase your options down the road. And I'm sure a lot of the viewers of this video do this already. We often do it intuitively.
Yeah.
But in the work that I've done, we've tried to come up with a kind of template to help career practitioners do this kind of work.
So what else? What are some other tips for
Sure.
career practitioners that you can?
Yeah. So first, I would say for those of you who have access to the Career Development Quarterly, if you're members of NCDA, you would have access to it. We publish an article in that journal, the Career Development CDQ, that is on psychology of working in practice, and that article summarizes what I'm going to say now.
When was that published, David?
2019.
Oh, 2019.
2019. And if people are interested, they could write to me at my email address at Boston College, which you can look up easily online. But basically, what we argued there was that there were two basic tasks in career practice. One is to do a needs assessment, kind of assess where your clients are at, and the next was to foster agentic action. So in terms of a needs assessment, we argued to use the basic psychology of working needs framework, those three sets of needs that I mentioned: survival, relatedness and social contribution, and self-determination. And we don't have an instrument for this, but we just suggest that practitioners kind of use this as a heuristic or as a framework and think, okay, where is this client at in terms of survival needs? Where are they in terms of their relational needs? Are they able to feel some sense of connection in their work lives, to make a contribution, which gets at this issue of meaning and purpose? And where are they in terms of self-determination? And then in terms of fostering changes, we developed a relatively, parsimonious model of fostering agentic action. And that includes three steps. The first one is proactive engagement, which is the kind of traditional thing that we do as practitioners, of trying to foster exploration, to help people develop decision-making skills, to help develop people's self-efficacy. The idea of trying to help people be proactive in their career search. So just kind of doing those traditional interventions. The second area in terms of fostering agentic action is enhancing critical consciousness. And this is the idea that that goes back to the work of the famous Brazilian pedagogical scholar and activist, Paulo Freire. And he wrote about this idea that when he was actually asked by the Brazilian government to help enhance literacy in Brazil. And his idea was, okay, we'll enhance literacy using the skills of an educator, but we're also going to help people read the world. We want people to understand what's going on in the broader systems and institutions of society. So critical consciousness, which is an integral part of PWT, is part of our intervention plan. And by this, we don't mean to discuss, are you Republican or Democrat? It's not about that. It's about helping people to think more broadly about the systemic causes of events. Our assumption is when you think critically about this, you'll end up with a broader understanding. And also you'll end up in a position where you'll feel protected from the self-blame and stigma that often happens when people are unemployed or underemployed. So the critical consciousness is a big part of this. And the third part is to enhance social and community support, which is to build on relational connections and help people access support from the community, whether it be through one-stop career centers or training programs. So I hope I didn't over-present this, but I did want to give the viewers a good overview of this.
So the critical consciousness, that's really interesting, because that's not typically taught in schools, right? And we're not, but it seems to me that that's a huge gap in our certainly our country, where we're not being critical of what's really happening and why is it happening, and rather than just get all my information from Facebook. It sounds like this critical consciousness is really helping people be able to look at things in a critical way and be able to examine it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it's helping people to think critically, to have what we call critical, to be able to reflect on phenomena critically. So I'll use the example of unemployment, which thankfully is down now, but we don't know how long that's going to last. Let's hope it does. But in working with unemployed clients, we often see they come into counseling or career coaching feeling like part of it's their fault. And I've had clients who've said this to me during the Great Recession of 2008, 2011. I had a client who said, David, no matter how often you tell me that it's a systemic factors, I still look at what I did in my job. And I think of, if I didn't do this, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have gotten laid off.
Wow.
So by helping this client and other clients like him to think, to really understand the systemic causes of unemployment based on the cyclical nature of the economy. I mean, sometimes I would get a little bit more focused on things like the overly neoliberal approach of the economy of reducing protections for workers. So some of the discussion does get a bit political. It's hard to do critical consciousness in a completely apolitical way. But actually, you raise a good point about the critical nature of it. So, we might have some people tell us they're engaging in critical consciousness, but we would think they're coming up with conspiracy theories. Right. So obviously people do need to think in a very critical way about the knowledge that they're being exposed to. So it's a pedagogical approach that has been increasingly being used in counseling and in psychology and in career development.
But it's so easy to blame myself for this situation, and I think it's actually the easiest solution. I should have done something different, or this person did this to me. That would be the other thing. This one person did this to me, when it often is a reflection of a whole bunch of stuff that's going on, right? I mean, there's a lot of squeezing going on right now in higher ed, right? I mean, higher ed across the country is getting squeezed really hard because the enrollment's not there. And people are like going online and, so what's going on? I mean, people are getting squeezed with commercial real estate because people are working from home and companies are starting to go, right? I mean, those are all these factors that are out there. And I could see, and I see it all the time with people that I work with, oh, it's my fault. And then they get into this, what I call the vortex of negativity, right? It's the, they're like, oh, it's bad. And then, oh yeah, I made it worse. And oh, I'll never get a job. I applied for a job and I couldn't get it. I applied for a job and couldn't get it. And it's that vortex of negativity. It just gets worse and worse. And then it's hard to get people out of that.
It's very hard. And that's where the social community support helps. One of the things some of my close colleagues and I have done, so it's one of the major tasks that we've taken on at the beginning of the pandemic, was to develop content for group workshops. And we call them the WIN workshops. The WIN stands for Work Intervention Network. So there's 10 of us involved in this. Actually, we do have a website, which
we can put that on the web page when we're done.
Okay, great. I'll send you the website.
Yeah.
And in these WIN workshops, we have developed pro bono workshop content that we are giving away, basically. We have a relationship now with all of the JVS agencies. We have a grant from the Network of Jewish Human Service Agencies, which runs the JVS agencies around the world. And a lot of our colleagues know how really supportive those JVS programs are. So we have these WIN workshops being disseminated in local JVSs, and sometimes they're being disseminated now in one-stop career centers. So we've trained people to run these workshops, and the workshops include, it's really based on psychology working theory. That includes a workshop on building relationships. There's one on fostering social awareness and reducing self-blame, which focuses on critical consciousness. There's one on the career planning and job search process. That actually is 2 workshops. And then there's another set of 2 workshops focused on building resilience and enhancing self-care. So that's an example of a kind of broader kind of intervention that we're providing that we believe it fills an important niche in the area of working with unemployment, underemployment, low-wage workers. In fact, we're developing an adaptation now for low-wage workers of the WIN program.
You know, and so much of the individuals struggle with blaming themselves. Group work is one of the best ways to help people get over that, because then they look across the table and somebody will go, well, no, you're normal, man. This is happening to all of us. It's like, oh, I thought it was just happening to me. No, it's happened. I was there, but I got through it, right? I mean, you get this group kind of thing, the concept that's going on. There's a lot of growth that can happen when you're working in group workshops.
Absolutely. In fact, that's been one of the beautiful aspects of these WIN workshops. When we evaluate it, we get feedback, is the connections. In fact, a workshop just was completed in the Philadelphia area, and the facilitators wrote to us and said, the group is still going to meet every week. Another one of my colleagues has set up these workshops, and she uses the buddy system where she actually helps to pair people, and she has the groups meeting every other week, and during the off week, the buddies meet. This is really, really important. You're right, because the group aspect really helps people to feel less isolated, less alone, and it keeps people from going into that vortex that you described.
Yeah, I mean, that's my reminder to get a hold of you, but we started early. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
But yeah, you know, I don't do a lot of workshops like I did when I worked at some colleges, and at colleges it was always easier to do the workshops, but workshops is sort of my favorite thing. You know, I love to have that interaction, and I just think you really see a lot more of those aha moments where people kind of go, you might be presenting information, and somebody may go, it came during the presentation of the information, and for other people it comes in that aha moment comes in the discussion that came after it, right? I mean, you sort of have the best of both worlds in a workshop.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think the workshop model has really worked well in this project. So if listeners are interested in this, they could write to me about this as well. We're trying to facilitate the expansion of the program, and have people, you know, who agree to work on this. The workshops work very well in an agency setting, you know,
Right.
One-stop career centers, places of this. Also in community colleges, I think they would work well, and also in four-year colleges, particularly when they're working with alums who are struggling in their work lives.
Wow, that's great. So yeah, definitely we'll post that information. Any final thoughts that you want to share with the career coaches, career service providers out there?
I would say that our work is more important than ever. Even in this point where the unemployment rate is low, where there's a lot of jobs, I think we're entering this period of precarity. To go back to the point I started with, we don't know how things are going to play out. We still have the backdrop of automation or robotics. We're not sure how many jobs that's going to affect. For example, I heard today, you know, there's a big push for electric vehicles, which I'm sure a lot of us support. It's really a way out for us of a number of conundrums, you know, especially with global warming. The unions, the auto unions, are worried that it'll do away with 1/3 of the jobs in the auto industry because the electric vehicles are they're not that complicated to build. So there's going to be a lot of flux, and for career providers, career practitioners, career coaches, you're doing really important work, and your work is essential, especially as we enter this period where we don't know what's going to happen with remote work and people working in person. The work we do is going to become much more complex and nuanced. So I just tip my hat to all of you who are in this field, and it's an honor to be in this field and to have, you know, opportunity to speak to everyone.
Well, that's great. So we'll just wrap up here. I'm Jim Peacock with Peak Careers Consulting. I started my business teaching the facilitating career development class. I've added these online discussion-based seminars, and they're on a bunch of different topics. They're 5 weeks long, and they're discussion-based, so that I don't run them with 4 to 10 career practitioners, career service providers, people from the HR field, people who are interested in those topics. And they're discussion based, but they are asynchronous also. So people can log in, early in the week and post and reply to others. So they're a little different. If you're interested in those, check those out on my website. Workshops are starting to come back. I'm doing a couple face-to-face workshops coming up here soon, and loving it. Also wrote the field guide for career practitioners, and then I also wrote last year really a journal about my trip to New Zealand after grad school many years ago, the adventure of finding me in New Zealand. But if you are a career practitioner and interested in signing up for my weekly career emails, you can go to the website, and there'll be one of those lovely annoying pop-ups that'll come up, and you can just sign up. Or click on this link. Sometimes the link will, depending on what you're looking at right now, the link will work. And you'll also get the top 10 tips of working with an undecided person. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or in any of these social media, but I spend most of my time, more of my time on LinkedIn than any of those platforms. And I just want to finally just say, David, wonderful to see you again. I can't wait to see you this June up here in Maine, and always love your work and appreciate you carving some time out for me today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I really enjoyed it. And it's great to see you. And I hope to see people who are local to the New England at this conference in Maine in June.
Awesome.